Hello, passengers, and welcome aboard the TV Pilot's License with service to Sunnyvale. We ask that you please fasten your headphones, secure your podcasting device, and remember, while wooden stakes are allowed on our flight, they do count as a personal item and must not be stored in the overhead luggage compartment.
Welcome to the TV Pilot's License. My name is Jeff Curvis, joined by Rich Inman and Max Singer. How you boys doing today?
I heard you say the stakes are high. Is that what I'm hearing over here?
The stakes are high. It's playoff baseball season and it's spooky season. So
and
let's
that means
combine
one thing: Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Yeah. So if I think baseball, I think vampires. Max, how are you doing today, bud?
Oh, I'm great. I assume if vampires are getting murdered, that Nick Castellanos hit a home run.
Well, boys, this week we are talking about Buffy the Vampire Slayer. But before we do so, Max, can you tell folks what this podcast is all about?
Here at TV Pilot's License, we break down and analyze the pilot episodes of some of TV's most famous, or in some cases, infamous shows. We learn a little bit more about how these shows came to be and were originally made, if they're effective pilot episodes and making us want to watch more, and if we think they made today. Go back and stream our old episodes from wherever you listen to podcasts. Check us out on YouTube and TikTok to see our smiling faces. And if it is your first time flying with us, then welcome aboard.
And Rich, what is your question of the week?
Well, this show got me thinking, how, if in any way possible, would a high schooler be able to pull off the amount of secrecy that being a vampire hunter takes? So I would want to know, reflect internally, think back to your high school years, and I want to know, how would your high school self handle the responsibility and secrecy of being a vampire slayer? Do you think you could do it?
I'm just going to say it, Rich. I don't think it would go too well. Unless unless we really upped my doses of ADD medication so I could be ultra focused during school to be able to handle the extracurriculars of being named the Slayer. In all honesty, you can just also Buffy, we'll talk about this. Buffy's wit and like quick one-liners, I couldn't come up with that shit in high school. Are you kidding me? I'd have to at least be like the rest of this cast in 26. So like, no, I could not be the Slayer. But Max, what about you? Living in Connecticut, trying to be the Slayer.
It's tricky because you really have to balance the secrecy aspect with the responsibility aspect. And as we all know from high school, you're just trying to pad that sweet, sweet resume, baby, and you need to be telling everyone what you're doing. You need to be so vocal about your extracurriculars if you want to get into a halfway decent college, because otherwise your world is doomed, I say. So, no, I don't think I could be secretive about it, because I would want everyone to know so that I could get into college.
Rich, what about yourself?
Yeah, what does UNC Chapel Hill think about me being a vampire slayer in my free time? I do not think I would. I think the responsibility and the secrecy element of it for me would both go by the wayside. There's no way I'm not telling somebody that I do that. Number one, because I hate going through hardships by myself. Number two, I could barely handle the pressures of JV baseball in addition to my classes. So there's no goddamn way you're going to catch me vampire slaying in addition.
Yeah, your coach asks you to warm up in the bullpen, and it's just like, wait 1 second, I got a vampire or two to kill, and then I'll be ready. My arm will be warmed up.
I've snapped so many bats in half to stab vampires.
We just can't. That's the reason why Rich uses a wooden bat when we insist he uses an aluminum one.
The aluminum's only going to affect the werewolves.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Silver aluminum. Well, Rich, thank you so much for that question of the week. Let's talk a little bit more about Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and we'll start off with a quick synopsis. A young woman destined to slay vampires, demons, and other infernal creatures deals with her life fighting evil with the help of her friends. Yeah, I think that does a really good job, not the most succinct version, of explaining, for the most part, what we watched. But Max, how did this show get made?
Today, we are talking about the pilot of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, titled Welcome to the Hellmouth, which originally aired on March 10th, 1997 on the WB. And we're talking about the show's creator today, Joss Whedon, a little bit.
All right, that's pretty spooky.
Whedon is a third-generation screenwriter, the son of Tom Whedon, a writer on sitcoms including Alice and the Golden Girls, and grandson of John Whedon, who worked on The Donna Reed Show and The Dick Van Dyke Show. After graduating from Wesleyan, Whedon works on sitcoms himself, including Roseanne and the short-lived NBC show Parenthood, not to be confused with the other NBC show, Parenthood. In 1991, Whedon sells his first feature screenplay, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, to the production company Sandollar, which happens to be owned by Dolly Parton. Be it a rush shooting schedule or different opinions on the tone of the film with the studio, Whedon departs the production. While Whedon's original script was praised in industry circles, the finished product received less than stellar critical reception, but does feature a stacked cast looking back with a 2024 lens. From here, Whedon makes waves in Hollywood as a writer and an uncredited script doctor, building a reputation with his work on Speed, Twister, Waterworld, and Toy Story, the latter of which earns him an Oscar nomination.
Waterworld earned him an Oscar nomination?
No,
I'm kidding.
Yeah, for best fucking movie ever.
for greatest ride in an amusement park ever.
Yeah, listen, you can say what you want about Waterworld, but it is forever enshrined in Universal Studios Florida. Forever. You're not allowed to get rid of rides and attractions once they're built in a theme park. That's the rules.
That's true.
Years later, Sandollar president Gail Berman approaches Whedon at a second crack with Buffy for a TV series, with the central concept being more in line with high school as a horror movie like Whedon envisioned. Whedon helped produce and finance a 25-minute pilot that never aired but was used to shop to networks, with the pilot landing at the WB. The show was adapted into a TV hour format, but today's pilot generally follows the same beats as the unaired version, just a little longer. One casting difference, though, was the shopped pilot. The role of the principal was played by legendary character actor, who you can currently see on that Netflix Adam Brody show, Stephen Tobolowsky. He's great. We love Stephen Tobolowsky, legendary character actor.
Is he the guy from Silicon Valley?
Yeah.
Yeah, all right, I did it.
He's great.
I love him.
Nobody Wants Us. That's the Netflix show I'm thinking of. The role of Buffy for the series was originally offered to one Natasha Lyonne, who turned it down, not wanting to be committed to the WB at the age of 16. Oh, I gotta slay it now. I gotta slay it now. Ah, Jesus! All these vampires.
They come for the pilot dissection. They stay for Max's Natasha Lyonne impression. We're we promised to do it once an episode.
The role of Buffy would, of course, go to Sarah Michelle Gellar, who originally was brought in for the role of Cordelia. Buffy is picked up the series, but is bumped from a full season order in 1996 in favor of Seventh Heaven, instead getting a 12-episode order as a mid-season replacement.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting talking about a show like this that is as iconic as it is, because when you say like, oh, Buffy wasn't originally Sarah Michelle Gellar, or that's not who they pictured for the first one, I'm just like, there's no fucking way. Sarah Michelle Gellar was born to be Buffy, even though there was a movie where she
I don't know.
What are we gonna do with all these vamps? They keep coming by.
If you don't think I'm making a TikTok where Natasha Lyonne's face is over Max's body, you're nuts. You're absolutely nuts.
This was almost a double American Pie cast member show with Jason Biggs as the principal.
Oh my gosh. Well, boys, you ready to jump into Buffy the Vampire Slayer?
Absolutely.
Sure.
Well, let's start off with how this show started off, and that is with a very, very distinct quote that, yes, I did write down because I wanted to just...
Oh, thank God.
Oh, it's
yeah,
so fast.
I know. In every generation, there is a chosen one. She alone will stand against the vampires, the demons, and the forces of darkness. She is the Slayer.
Yeah.
Now, who do you think says that line in the show? Because I looked it up, and the answer will surprise you.
Legendary character actor Stephen Tobolowsky.
I'm going with that one.
It is Joss Whedon. Joss Whedon said the line for the pilot. But what do you think about like almost giving this line, this imagery before we sort of drop into the horrors of high school?
They did the exact same thing for Xena, and it's kind of giving syndicated series.
Yes,
it
is.
Why does this sound so familiar? Is it the exact same thing from Xena?
It's almost the sign of like the producers were like, you know what? the audience, they're fucking dumb. They don't know why they're watching this. We need to give them a role explainer of why Buffy is so special, even though they say nearly the same exact fucking line in the library during the middle of this pilot. And I'm just like, just say it once.
Just so you'd heard me from before. They're every generation. There is one woman.
What did we think of our little switcheroo cold open of the woman in distress with a predator only turning out to be the predator?
I called it.
Rich has been watching so many
she's
pilots. She's going
to be the vampire, I bet.
Yeah, you 16-year-olds aren't getting shit past me. I'm smarter than you.
16-year-olds didn't write it.
Max, what about you?
I really do like that it's a switcheroo on classic horror tropes. I like that we get the jerk non-believer boyfriend, the blonde femme fatale who we think is going to be the first victim. She's afraid to die. He's kind of being a little like, edgy and, life on the edge. And obviously it's a fun gambit then to pull out the rug and to have her kill him. Like it's really fun to break from these tropes. I think it tells you immediately that it's like, don't believe like what you think you know. Like anything that you think you know about horror is going out the window because we're gonna put all that on its head for this show.
This is definitely going to be one of those episodes where it's just us talking about names of actors that like maybe some people recognize, but other people don't, because instantly I recognize Julie Benz. She was the wife of Dexter in Dexter, and she's been in a couple of other things, but I'm like, oh yeah, this is child Julie Benz. She was like 22 at the time of filming this. And then like after we get this switcheroo, holy shit. The intro for this show is so badass. It is so much fun and so 90s coded that I was just like, yep, I'm in it. Like, I love the text. That's like a little bit gothic. I love like the quick shots and the scenes of Sarah Michelle Gellar doing her best at choreography. Like, give me more of this. It is perfectly just for me.
That's how you know they got a 12-episode order, baby. They put all those clips in the pilot theme song. How did they do that? You haven't seen any of them yet.
God, this entire pilot soundtrack is just ass rock. Like this is all Tony Hawk's Boom Boom Huck Jam type shit that they're playing throughout the pilot of Buffy.
Is that the name of your Spotify playlist? Tony Hawk's Boom Boom Huck Jam.
I mean, I think that this show does do a great job of answering the question when it comes to like, why are we here? Why is this day different than any other day? It's, well, Buffy
There's vampires, Jeff. That's why it's so different.
That vampires aren't at every high school, only like the private schools. Right. But in this instance, I do really find it interesting that it's, hey, Buffy has moved from a new school, but what did you guys think of the idea of, hey, we're treating this as if everyone saw the movie Buffy the Vampire Slayer and treating this as a continuation of that?
Who didn't know it was a movie beforehand? Because that was me.
So Rich, I'm going to ask you actually then, like, you seeing all this stuff, and they almost give the audience an excuse. We have this great scene where she's meeting with the headmaster, and he's like, we don't really care about the past. And he rips up her transcript only to tape it together. And like, I loved this scene.
Amazing moment.
But I'm curious from your standpoint of like, now knowing that it was a movie, like, did you feel sort of out of place watching this at any point?
Yeah. I mean, not knowing that this is a movie probably helped me enjoy it, I guess, a little bit. TV versions of movies rarely work. It's like a 100 batting average on those kinds of things. Like the only things that I can compare it to are like What We Do in the Shadows and like probably another example. But I really don't see a lot of them converting well to TV. And can you give me an explainer as someone who has watched the movie of how close this character is to the original movie?
I mean, as far as it's been a while. But as far as I remember, they do a good job of giving you like really the basic notes of Buffy was basically given this title as the Slayer in high school. Her high school was overrun by vampires. She did, in fact, burn down the school gymnasium and was kicked out of the high school for burning down the gymnasium. Entirely different actress. Okay. The movie was made quite a few years earlier.
About. The movie is about her burning down ends
well,
with her burning down.
That's the big fight at the end of the movie.
Okay.
So it's sort of leading up and
it's tongue-in-cheek.
I just want to be a high schooler, and then guess what? You can't. You have to do this extracurricular activity.
You can't. Arson.
Yeah, this is fascinating because it's like it's a pilot, it's a spin-off, it's a sequel, it's a requel, like it's all these different things in one. And I think I read that Whedon wanted it to essentially serve as a pilot, but also a sequel from his original script before 20th Century Fox, sank their teeth into it.
Right.
And there's a lot of references in here that, and I've never seen the film version, that I guess are references to that, but they also have to then walk that tightrope of, can I just tune into this show in the spring of 97 or in the, fall of 2024, whenever you're watching it for the first time? And can I understand these things off the bat?
And I think
Vampire Bat.
I think one of the ways that Joss Whedon does a very good job of walking that tightrope is having a heavy focus on Sarah Michelle Gellar's character of Buffy is very much just a person who is meeting everyone. This is meeting all of the different characters of this new high school as the new girl, right? We get, I don't have anyone's characters' names written down for the most part, but like Alyson Hannigan is in this one. And
it's important. It's important you don't have the actors' names written down too.
Alyson Hannigan, who plays Willow Rosenberg.
Let me do that again. We have Alyson Hannigan as Willow Rosenberg. We have like the character,
the first
of
ever red-haired Jew.
Oh my god! We have Xander Harris. We have Cordelia Chase. We have like these normal, who are the people that you are meeting at a high school who almost fit these stereotypes, to put the audience into the idea. And like, this almost feels like a way of selling to executives. Like, hey, it's not only going to be about vampires. It's gonna be about the drama of being a high schooler and like how tough it is being the new girl in school and all of that stuff. Max, you're shaking your head. Yes. I want to hear more.
I think that's what I've found curious about Buffy. This is my first exposure to this series. I've never seen an episode before in my life. And listen, frequent flyers know that I tend to poo-poo some of the more supernatural stuff we do on this podcast. And I really appreciated that it felt so much like a high school show first and supernatural phenomenons second. And we get all of the tropes of first day of school, what's everyone been up to, understanding the cliques and the hierarchy, skateboards, because it's the 90s. Again, Tony Hawk's Boom Boom Huck Jam. For people who are local to Los Angeles, Sunnydale is actually Torrance High School. South Bay, stand up. But I like that it feels ingrained and lived in as a high school experience. And we settle on these elements first before we start getting into like really why is today different.
So one thing that happens in this meeting of everyone that I have written down in big, bold notes. Actually, there's two things. One is, holy shit, the ages of these actors is
all over
wild.
The place.
Because Sarah Michelle Gellar, when she filmed this, was 19 years old. 19 going on to 20. But then we have Nicholas Brendon was 26. The Charisma Carpenter was 27 when she filmed this. Like there's a very large age. I believe Alyson Hannigan.
She goes by Riz now. Just Riz.
26. Oh my God, Rich.
Let me tell you about another Riz Carpenter. That's our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ.
Oh
wow.
God,
nailed it.
But the oh God, the thing that I have written down is this coolness factor test that Cordelia puts Buffy through. And there's questions like, what do we think of James Spader? Which then Buffy says dreamboat. So my question for you guys is, what would be one question on your coolness factor test if you were trying to figure out if someone was a good hang who is new to school?
Hey, what do you think about New Radicals? Aren't they pretty cool? Don't you also love New Radicals?
Max, what about yourself?
Oh man, yeah, I'm absolutely popping something on like oh god, I've never had to prove my coolness before. Oh god, I'm having an existential
and right
crisis.
There is the coolness test.
Yeah.
Wait, Max.
Does Cordelia's Charisma Carpenter ask her a question about John Tesh in this?
Yes,
Is
she
that
does as well.
Hold on. I wrote this down because we need to talk about this. Who does she think John Tesh is?
Is there a second John Tesh beyond the guy who wrote the music for Round Ball Rock, the theme song for the NBA on NBC?
Just as super in that. See, that is the spinoff of the show that they were afraid to make. It is all about Cordelia trying to find John Tesh and trying to go to all of his concerts.
Literally, she can't possibly be talking about that same John Tesh.
I mean, she can be talking about the same John Tesh. I mean, you know.
She could be a fan. Like, you know, people have weird hobbies, and that is her coolness factor test. You have to be as into the NBA on NBC as she is every single time.
Everybody loves John Tesh live at Red Rocks 95.
So moving forward a little bit with this pilot, I'm curious about, I think one of the things that stands out to me is, while we meet a bunch of characters, we meet the librarian. We see one of the most beautiful public school libraries I've ever seen in my damn fucking life that does not fit in to that high school whatsoever.
That thing has like 400 books in it total. There's no way it has more.
Well, that's the thing. It's beautiful, but they spent all of the budget on the woodwork, and then that's it. They can't afford books anymore.
You mean that one table isn't enough for the entire school?
And you know I'm finding what computer games have been uploaded to the emulators.
I'm curious what you guys thought about the writing for this show, because there were certain moments that really stood out to me as like, oh, Joss Whedon wrote this. Specifically, one was there was a locker room joke that was made that I'm pretty sure both of you would have written down, but there was a, what type of name is Buffy? Hey, aphrodisia. And I was just like, yeah, that is a Joss Whedon joke till the day I die. And I was like, that's great, but those were littered around, and I'm curious if you find it intriguing at all, or maybe it's a little bit dated to you.
Joss Whedon wrote this whole thing, yeah?
Yes.
It sounds like a grown man wrote this and not anyone who knows any particular high schooler at any point in his life. It is, there's this, number one, the women, for being so a women dominated show, a lot of them are having very vapid conversations and talk in a very weird way that doesn't even sound like the Valley Girl craze of the 80s. It's just like, it feels like someone watched Clueless or Heathers like once and then tried to write like an LA high school script. You know what I mean?
Max, what about you?
Yeah, it's easy to pin this as being older individual who has now written all these adult roles, having to go back and write 16-year-olds.
Mm-hmm.
I think it does have some fun, like high-low elements. Throwing this character of Giles into this high school world is inherently very silly. And we get dialogue that points out how silly it is, with saying that he transferred to our high school from the British Museum or a British museum. I did get a chuckle out of that. But it is like, we're just going to put these fish out of water characters into Sunnydale, just into this town. We're going to drop them in here. And there's no real rhyme or reason or like purpose. It's just like, yep, this is Sunnydale, and there's all these characters now.
There's also a lot of, one of the interesting things about watching this show 27 years later is the idea of like, some of the jokes are fairly dated as far as like how they approach them. Like there is a Time Life series like purchase where they're joking about getting book or getting the phone or getting the calendar between Giles and Buffy.
Right.
It does seem almost as if this was written of like, oh, I have this really cool idea. I can't wait to write it. Oh shit, my main character is someone I cannot relate to whatsoever when writing this show. But I got Giles. I'm going to nail Giles.
But I do think that's the catch-22 of writing references, is that anything that is teen or period, you need to have references because that's how they communicate. Like, we all did it. We all communicate through references as a way of finding commonality.
We all love John Tesh in 1997. Evergreen John Tesh. But those things, with the exception of John Tesh, do lose some of their steam as the years go on, and you find yourself be like, oh, this is very much something of the mid-90s or whatever the period is, because reference points change. That's just the way pop culture works. Right.
So I was going to say, like, one of the things that we've talked about is we've talked a lot about high school. There's been small hints to the concept of the evil that lurks underneath the surface, literally underneath the surface of Sunnyvale, in a moment where I have in my notes, this must be Disney World because there's tunnels underneath the high school. But I think that it is really interesting that we focus so much on like talking about how Buffy is this vampire slayer without really showing it until we're about at like the 35-minute mark of this pilot, where Buffy's being really stalked by this stranger in an alley, and we get to see a familiar, maybe a bony familiar face.
Oh yeah, you're talking about one Mr. David Boreanaz, who's looks exactly the same as he does in Bones, which is truly alarming.
Yeah,
I think he might be actually
really
a vampire.
It's no wonder that he spent 25 plus years just going from one show to another. That man does not age.
And I mean, his character is very different. We do get the sense that he is in on both sides of the world. Maybe something that him and Buffy could potentially relate to if he did not only have like 90 seconds of screen time, gave her a cross, and then bounced as quickly as he possibly could. But we do get this sneak preview of like Buffy's abilities, of the idea of like she does that kick-ass gymnastics move on just the random pipe that every alleyway has.
Yep.
I dare you to prove me wrong. Prove me wrong, Twitter and TikTok and Instagram.
The Atlanta Games were just a few months before gymnastics were hot in the landscape of American people. I do want to highlight the thing that you mentioned, Jeff, about not showing Buffy's abilities for a pretty long way in this pilot. And I actually think it's a great choice by Whedon to have Buffy resist the call. I think that's very like classic story structure, hero's journey of this person is thrust into the unknown, which is Sunnyvale, and there's a call given to her and she resists it and she resists it. And then finally she hears it and now things will never be the same. And I think making her want to resist vampire slaying and just be a high schooler is important to set up for as much of like the first act and a half as possible. And I love that she does it through things like I've both been there and done that. I'm moving on. I love that it's like SoCal girl first, vampire slayer second, and we build the character before we get into the stabbing of the vampires.
I definitely agree. I do appreciate that choice. However, the show is called Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Like, you can predict what's going to happen. So, I mean, maybe it works better on like the 1997 audiences who aren't like, don't have the name Buffy the Vampire Slayer playing on the bottom third of their screen at all times. But like, it's hard to.
Lynch was just like, "Where's the vampire slaying?"
Yeah, just sitting there cross-eyed. When are they going to get to the vampire slaying?
Like, it's been 45 minutes, and I have seen zero vampires.
I've seen nary a vampire in the script. Yeah, I mean, I do like that she does want to. Number one, how the hell does everyone know that she is a vampire slayer and coming to town? Because they're like, this has none of that same comic book logic of just like, oh, there's some hero that's saving everybody in a town over. Oh, well, anyways, it's like they kind of throw that away, and so many people know about it. And the fact that, like, I mean, well, we did touch on Mr. Giles a little bit, but he's like, what a fucking creep around a high schooler.
So two things, Rich, when you were talking about, like, oh, could you keep the secrecy of being the Vampire Slayer?
She can't either, apparently.
Yes, Buffy can't. Buffy is failing miserably at that factor. But also, there is a version of this show where I am just imagining her wearing a mask when she's, like, killing vampires, and I need that now. Like, if someone could just, you know what, AI's at a level now where you could, like, probably just force AI to put a mask on Sarah Michelle Gellar.
We're not a pro AI podcast. I wanted to make that exceptionally clear.
I want someone to just draw a mask on their TV screen in, like, Sharpie. So oh my God.
Make it a little piece of paper and follow Buffy around the screen.
That's a job right there. We're creating jobs on this podcast. Max, you talked a little bit about the ass rock of this show and how it was filled with it, and you've been loving Tony Hawk. Tell me about what you were thinking when we went to the hottest club in Sunnyvale.
So we're going to talk about Sunnyvale's hottest and only club, Bronze, a little bit. Why Giles is also hanging out there is beyond me.
And that is not alarming to anyone. They do specify saying anybody gets in there.
Yeah, I believe that Buffy paid a small cover at the door was let in. So there is a real band that is playing at Bronze in this scene by the name of Sprung Monkey, which is a San Diego funk metal, according to Wikipedia.
Nope, that's bad.
Band that, as far as I can tell, only exists for the purpose of being on late 90s and early 2000s TV and movie soundtracks. Yeah. They peaked at number 13 on the Billboard Hot 100 with their song Get 'Em Outta Here, which was featured on the 10 Things I Hate About You. They've also
really
had
high.
Another song of theirs called SoCal Loco, parentheses, Party Like a Rock Star, which was featured in Dude, Where's My Car?
Sure.
And their song Get a Taste was featured in both Van Wilder and King of the Hill. And they also played an entire set in the first episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I've never heard of this band, but I've seen every single one of these things that I've listed. So apparently I'm very well versed in the works of Sprung Monkey.
Yeah, I also looked up their IMDb, like I because all the band members are basically uncredited from this band on the IMDb page. It seems like all of them were also heavily involved with writing Not Another Teen Movie. And I don't know if that's just like they're like all on the production and music side and writing side of Not Another Teen Movie, but we just got a glimpse of all four people who wrote that satire movie, which is, I mean, I guess part of the genre too. But yeah, if there is a generic ass rock band that you need for your movie, you said Sludge Monkey? Is that what it's called?
Sprung Monkey.
Sludge Monkey. That's the auto dealer that goes across the street.
Both work, but call them up, I guess. It's a necessary part.
So I think that using the club as almost this is where we get the action. This is where we start to really see Buffy accept that she very hesitantly accept that she has to take this role of protector for the people she's known for maybe 20 minutes total. And like Alyson Hannigan gets taken by this mysterious figure, this guy, and oh my God, that could never happen because Alyson Hannigan's character, Willow, is a complete dork.
Yeah.
She's
the only Catholic Jew I've ever seen. That girl is so Irish. I'm sorry. Why'd they make her a Rosenberg? Just do it. Just do Willow Hannigan. It's not that hard.
I'm curious for you to, as far as like, once we get to the club, we very much transition immediately from this high school drama sort of centered show into fantasy, diving fully headfirst into the concept of there's vampires, there's blood ritual, there's some really interesting makeup choices to make you believe that they're vampires rather than just giving them interesting teeth.
There's a lovely natural hot spring full of blood.
Yeah, that a billionaire would love if it's youthful blood. I'm curious what you both thought when this show turns fully and really embraces the idea of, now we're going to show Rich the vampire slaying that he's been asking for 45 minutes for.
Stake his ass.
I like how quickly we pick up the pace here. I like that the second we get into cause for concern and Buffy springs into action, it's chase scenes, it's fight scenes. There's one little joke pause for Cordelia saying,
yes,
God, what is your childhood trauma? Followed by picking up her cell phone and saying, I have to call everyone I ever met right now.
That was in my things I love.
Me too.
That is the most perfect 16-year-old response imaginable. Like, it's not a thing that anyone would ever say, but it's also the perfect line for that moment, if that makes sense.
It does also, it kind of also feels like it's making fun of 16-year-olds too. Like, it seems like an adult saying, like, what's a crazy adult thing that a 16-year-old could say? Like, did people talk about childhood trauma in the 90s? I don't know if they did.
I mean, I can't applaud Charisma Carpenter enough for that line reading.
The Rizzler.
Yeah, Riz Carpenter literally destroyed it. Jesus Christ destroyed the line reading for that particular line. And like, that's the thing, is when you have someone who has become this icon for being Cordelia in Charisma Carpenter, and then finding out, oh, that could have been Sarah Michelle Gellar saying that line. I'm like, absolutely fucking not. I cannot picture her saying that line whatsoever. But
it's not big enough of a character for Sarah Michelle Gellar, to be honest.
Well, as of this moment, just watching the pilot. Yes. Yeah, as of this moment, for sure. We get to see Buffy Vampire Slay. She kills one.
Yeah, it's in the title of the show. She's doing the thing from the name of the show.
But we get this mausoleum fight scene that is happening in the end of this pilot with some really great cutaways and fight choreography for people who have never done fight choreography before. And our pilot does end on a cliffhanger of sorts, of seeing that Buffy might got in the first episode. I
bet she doesn't. I bet that doesn't happen.
How funny would it be if...
Wait, hold on. Someone needs to do that. Someone needs to make a pilot where they kill off the main protagonist in the first episode, and everyone else has to deal with it.
It's just a bunch of people pretending to be Buffy every single episode. A Weekend at Bernie's moment. I mean, Max, seeing Buffy go into action, considering when this was made as well, I think that's a really important thing. Like, we are in the midst of the 90s where this sort of action was like seen as like, oh, hell yeah, this is great. What are you thinking?
There is some real clunky camera choreography in this fight. I will start by saying that there is definitely some, you chop, cut, we're going to turn, we're going to reframe, and then we're going to do this flip, and then that's the body double. It is a WB fight scene from 1997. I want to start off by saying that first and foremost. But I think that spending all of this time building the world, building the high school, building these new relationships, and then, boom, 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 action, fight, killing vampires, to then have it just end on a cliffhanger. It's like, as soon as we ramp up, we almost pulled the rug out from under our audience. And yeah, it does make you want to know what's going to happen next. The fact that you may have tuned in for the first time, and now you have to wait an entire week if you're a teenager in 1997 to see what's going to happen to this character you just came to know and love, that's exciting.
Yep.
So that is the end of our pilot. But I'd love to ask the two of you, were there any moments that you want to give some love and things that you loved about this pilot, or give a little extra shine?
We didn't talk about him, but there's one other kind of character in our main circle, played by the actor Eric Balfour. He plays Jesse. He's the other guy who gets seduced and, kind of sauntered off with a vampire at the club. But Eric Balfour, he's a love of TVPL. He's in the first season of 24, playing Milo, one of the big CTU guys. He also has a great arc in the first season of the OC as the character of Eddie. And he just plays dumb guy so well on this. In the other things that I named, he plays like edgy guy, and he's so dumb. He's so good at being dumb, SoCal guy in this pilot. So here's to you, Eric Balfour. You're my favorite dumb guy this week.
Rich, what about you?
I'm going to give a little bit of I'm just going to give a shout out to one line in particular, which I believe was said to Jesse, and it is Alyson Hannigan saying, "In the library, ... where the books live." trying to explain what a library is, and that was truly what a delight of a line that is. I really enjoyed it.
What if I told you that one of the characters that we saw in full vampire garb was a classic character from the movie Animal House? Because Mark Metcalf is in this movie. He played Niedermeyer in Animal House, and I was looking and I was like, I recognize that man's face without the vampire makeup on.
You mean
and
Niedermeyer undead?
Yeah.
There's gonna be one Animal House fan who gets that.
It's one of those things where I was just like, holy shit, that's amazing. Like what a just like a dudes talking about dudes. But there's also this line delivery.
So the thing you liked about this
No,
pilot is
I just had to shout it out.
A guy from Animal House is in it?
We didn't talk about the master. I just wanted to shout out Mark Metcalf.
Okay.
But I do want to talk about there's this vampire Thomas, which is just a great vampire name. And for some reason, he speaks in like a slightly British, very low tone accent. And he says this line so dryly to Buffy where he's like, "You're strong. I am stronger." And he just knocks the shit out of her.
Yeah.
Also, like,
she falls into an open grave with a skeleton there. And I realized, I don't think I know how mausoleums work.
What about wait a minute moments? What were things that caused you pause while you were watching this pilot that maybe we didn't talk about?
Oh boy. Can I go first?
Yeah, you absolutely can.
Okay. There's a lot of plot holes in this. Number one, why is this one teacher from the library following this girl around constantly? How is it not very obvious to everyone else in the school that a teacher is touching this one girl? And also, I don't know. Some of the lines that are given to these girls are like, gives me the Wiggins and pause and neg and stuff like that is very like I'm trying to invent a high school slang that didn't exist. And just like, it felt so forced. I'm giving my wait a minute moment to Joss Whedon, I guess.
What about you, Max?
Well, Rich's answer is really giving me the Wiggins. Clearly he didn't grow up in SoCal in the mid-90s.
Oh my God.
I think for me, my wait a minute just goes to the concept of this, because they refer to Sunnydale as being a small town multiple times in the first act of this show. They refer to it being like
a one Starbucks
downtown. The downtown is like one street, and it feels like it's kind of quaint. No, like small suburban town is also having a massive warehouse all ages club. Like when they show bronze and it's this just massive warehouse turned into a club, I was like, there's no way this exists in a small suburban town. There's just no way.
If you're in a small town, that's someone's house that you're going to. That's one person's garage or finished basement.
We all know the one guy whose cousin is friends with one of the guys in Sprung Monkey, and that's how you get them to play your house.
Oh my gosh. I will say that one of the things that's sort of a wait a minute moment for me is the idea of there are some lines that are said that I really, really enjoyed, but just who was saying them just sort of took me out of it at the same time, right? Like there was one in particular where I'm trying to find it in my notes, but it was Buffy talking to her mom about going to this club, and she's like, "Oh, I'm going to a club," and the mom said, "Will there be boys there?" And Buffy said, no, it's a nun club. And I was just like, that's really funny. I don't think that Buffy's saying that in all actuality. But yeah, that's sort of the the double-edged sword of someone just writing a passion project, but maybe not bringing other folks into that passion project as well. We do have an in-flight question, one more question for the two of you. And our in-flight question came from Instagram. Buffy gives off the vibes of High School Van Helsing. What classic monster movie would you want to be turned into a WB high school show?
Ooh.
Ooh. Ooh.
Oh.
So I am asking the two of you. You get to be.
Wait,
we'll make it the CW.
Can it just be like a horror or just any horror movie?
It could be any horror movie too. I'll open it up. I was thinking Universal Studios classic monster movies, but we'll open it up to you. What are you thinking, Rich? You have a devilish smile, so I think you're going to say something absurd.
I want to make a WB drama involving the beach that makes you old. I just want kids to come back from vacation and they're 73. Just see how that works.
It's just this really dark beach blanket bingo kind of movie.
Oh.
Keep aging, goofball. Keep aging.
Max, what about yourself?
All right. Well, I actually have a project that I've written called Young Babadook.
Oh my god.
Oh god.
See, the thing is, I was thinking about this and I was genuinely having a very hard time with it because I was like, oh, we've already made Teen Wolf into like this sexy drama thing on MTV that we will eventually do on this podcast because Jesus Christ, is that pilot something? And then I was just like, Invisible Man's a little bit too creepy, especially given the times we are in today. But then I was just like, it would be a lot of fun to do something like do a Phantom of the Opera-esque show of like there is this mysterious human being like almost Hunchback of Notre Dame like in the high school, and then we find out that depending on which version of Hunchback of Notre Dame you grew up with, it could either be a really fun story or a terrifying one. But thank you so much for that in-flight question. We'll talk a little bit more about how to submit those at the end of the episode. Let's talk a little bit about the history of this show. This show was 7 seasons and 144 episodes. I would like to specifically thank Nerf Herder for the theme music for this show. Now, this is one of the first and only WB to UPN transitions we've seen where the WB actually sold this show off and its rights to UPN, even though they're technically under the same bubble. But this was a very successful show for the most part, even as a cult status, considering how WB is done. It topped off in season 4 as the number 120th most watched show on TV, which you might be like, oh, what are the numbers like that? For that, well, it was the 90s and early 2000s, so 5.3 million people.
That's crazy.
Which would be like one of the top most watched shows right now if we were to do it.
That's going on after 911 Lone Star, for sure.
That's going after 911, then 911 Lone Star, then Dr. Odyssey, and then you can also find it on FX. Let's talk a little bit about this show's the Buffyverse, as it has been come to known, is really quite expansive. And this was probably one of the most fun times I've had doing the history of a show because sure, you had Angel, which was this super uber successful show because David Boreanaz constantly has to be working. If he stops moving, he will die. But additionally, you also had a couple of attempts at films. You had a Audible book series that came out in like 2007. There were books, there were video games, there were comic books. And what they actually did for the comic books, which I really, really enjoyed learning about, is they named them seasons. So it was continuations of the show. So the next one, the first series of comic books was season 8. And then it was season 9. They went like all the way up to season 15.
And it was Joss Whedon writing all of them?
I believe it was, I forget what the name of the comic book shop that did it, but it was, I believe Joss Whedon had a little bit to do with it. There were some planned additional spinoffs of the show based off of other characters from the show that people really liked. But there was not enough interest. There was an attempted reboot of the show in 2018, but we'll see if that ever happens because there's definitely
My
interest.
guess is no if it's been 6 years.
Maybe. Who knows? People are desperate for IP right now. So here's a first for TV Pilot's License. There is a conference called the Slayer Conference, which focuses and brings academics together to talk about the importance of Buffy on the pop culture world. And Joss Whedon owns a textbook company that produces literature about Buffy. Yes, I think that is a first and only for us. Also, of course, this was made before the age of streaming, so there are both VHSs and DVDs of this entire series. Let's talk about awards. 134 nominations and 29 wins, including 2 Primetime Emmy wins, 1 for music composition and 1 for outstanding makeup. And
Sprung Monkey got an Emmy?
Sarah Michelle Gellar has the honor of having a Kids' Choice Award for female butt kicker. That is the award that she won.
That sounds right.
And don't worry, both Alyson Hannigan and SMG are both hanging 10 with their Teen Choice Awards. And that is the history of this show. And rather than do a game of the week this week, let's just land this plane. Let's talk a little bit more about this pilot in the sense of, based off of the pilot episode, would you continue watching Buffy the Vampire Slayer? We were ending on a cliffhanger. Does Buffy survive? Do I get my dream of Weekend at Bernie's, but with Buffy the Vampire Slayer? Yeah. And then secondly, there was an attempt at a spinoff. There's a lot of interest in supernatural stuff in the zeitgeist. And it forever is that going to be that way. People love spooky shit. People love high school dramas. You put them together, it's like catnip for the CW right now. So do you think there's a space for maybe retelling the story of Buffy the Vampire Slayer to a new generation? And Rich, I'm going to have you kick us off.
So I'm going to give a rare, no, I'm not watching any more of this. Yes, I think they should do a new storyline of it. Because I think we can do better than this. I think it's a good story. I think it is a character that people seem to really vibe with and love. I think there's a lot more depth that can be given to Sabrina. I'm sorry, not Sabrina the Teenage Witch. It is Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
That's next week.
I do think that Buffy has clicked with a lot of people. I just don't think that Joss Whedon is the messenger. And I think the whole script felt really weak. Felt like there was a lot of plot holes. The whole thing was shot like Xena. It was just like, it is so... I feel like the concept of this show would really excel now compared to what it did in 97. Not to ruffle any feathers of people who did like this show, but yeah, I just don't, even with the nostalgia factor, it just does not do very much for me.
Max, what about yourself?
This is a surprising one for me. I'm actually going to give it a second episode. I think that Buffy does a good job, like I said earlier, of being a teen show first and a supernatural sensation second. And I have a soft spot for a lot of these mid to late 90s teen films and shows. And I think that the balance of humor and butt kicking is something that I would want to keep going with. And yes, I think that there is a version of the show that could exist and be successful in today's pop culture landscape. Even though I've never seen this show before, I know a big part of its history has to do with how it used real world situations that teens went through or bigger scope issues as metaphors and how it incorporated them into its episodes. And I think that if you find a way to do that and you're willing to go after issues and topics that maybe aren't as represented in teen show media, or you're willing to do it with, the lens and scope that it deserves, you could do a really effective version of this show in 2024. I'd be very curious to see what that looks like. And it's a rare one where I would say, I think I could actually support this coming back in some shape or form.
Nice.
Max, I find myself in a very similar position to yourself. And I do have 90s nostalgia for this. This is why if you make anything that's 90s, millennials are attracted to it like catnip for the most part. And like I am holding out this little bit of hope that maybe after the pilot, it gets a little bit less clunky. And I want to give it a couple more episodes to try and see, because it's one of those things. Sometimes that's the reason we made the show. Sometimes pilots sort of suck and it's a really good TV show afterwards. And this just might be one of those instances where the pilot isn't a true representation of the show itself, because this is a cult hit show.
Right.
When I told folks that we were doing this, they freaked out and were like, holy shit, finally. And it's like, really? This? Like, that was what I was thinking to myself at points of it. And I want to attach a very particular name to this show if it was ever going to be remade. And it sounds like the obvious choice, and that's because it is. And that's
Natasha
Greg
Lyonne.
Berlanti. I think that Greg Berlanti should really, really look at Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And if Joss Whedon will let it go, let Greg Berlanti do this, because he just has this innate talent for making great CW shows. And that is where
you love
this
Everward
show,
so much.
You literally, like, if you want a CW show to last 6 seasons, just call Greg Berlanti and he will dominate it.
And call up my boy, character actor Stephen Tobolowsky, to play the principal.
To play Buffy.
It's the redemption arc that we didn't know we needed. Well, gentlemen, that is our flight. But before we go, I want to make sure that folks know where to find you. And Rich, where can folks find you?
You can find me in the library where the books live. And you can find me also on Instagram at Damn That's Rich. You can find original sketch comedy from Max and myself. And as of today, you can see me on stage at or see my sketches on stage at the Pack Theater coming up this season.
Max, what about yourself?
You can catch me on the road following Sprung Monkey city to city. You can find me on all things social media at Maxwell Singh. And
you can find me calling everyone I know. But if you're looking for me on social media, you can find me at Run Jeff Run. If you're looking for the TV Pilot's License, you can find us anywhere you listen to podcasts. You can also see our smiling faces on YouTube and find us anywhere you follow on social media. If you have a question for the show or about the show, maybe about our next episode, you can always submit a question at tvpilotslicense@gmail.com, tvpilotslicense.com, or 213-290-1713 to leave us a voicemail. Make sure to watch out for our Instagram for some sneak previews of some of the shows that we have coming up. But with the plane landed and the seatbelt sign off, we look forward to flying the bright skies of the TV world with you again soon. And until then...
That's enoughy, Buffy.